I would say it's more phases of awakening over time. I thought since 2012 that was like my big awakening, but this one just kind of blew the lid off of everything all at once, and it gave me a different vision. People had told me all the time about, cracking open your crown chakra and your heart chakra and having like a kundalini awakening, right? People can talk to you about it all they want. Half the time, it's probably going to sound like bullshit until it happens to you, right? It was the most otherworldly, proof positive that we are spiritual beings living a human experience.
What happens if you're a serial entrepreneur who goes on a quest to find out what makes business truly run and truly successful? Well, if you're like Tyler Musson, you go down a rabbit hole of knowledge and information that led him to what he says is an awakening. Now, this conversation is a little bit longer than my usual ones, but it's packed with information. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate the invite, Amani.
So, tell me a little bit about your background. You're from Washington originally. Tell me about where you're from and what you were doing before you had the spiritual enlightenment.
Man. Well, I'm from Washington State, from two different small towns. I was born in Wenatchee, Washington, which is the apple and cherry capital of the world. Kind of a high desert area of Washington State, agricultural. And then my mom lived in Quincy, Washington, which was a very small town. She married a farmer and multi-generational Basque farm. So I grew up on a farm in Quincy, and I spent weekends and summers with my dad in Wenatchee. And I live in Boise, Idaho now.
So, what were you doing before, I guess, your spiritual awakening or epiphany?
Mm, man, I would say it's more phases of awakening over time. But anything from, almost sub-perceptual until something rocks you even bigger, and then you travel back through those perspectives, which are basically like another dimension, is your past, your present, your future, right? And so all these awakenings kind of happen all throughout your life. And I would say mine like officially started around 2008 with the crash. And then just slowly awakening from there, just doing a lot of independent research. But the one that really rocked me was about must be about 5 months ago now. A relationship um, that just abruptly and totally unexpectedly ended, and kind of for all the reasons I thought, but it just opened my eyes again to just how crafty and cunning certain people can be, that a lot of people either wouldn't believe it if we told you the behaviors of certain people to manipulate your consciousness to get what they want out of you, but be somebody completely different on the inside that doesn't come out till later on. The classic, wolf in sheep's clothing type thing. But yeah, when we had this breakup, it was like so disorienting. And it was like within 24 hours, um, people told me all the time about, cracking open your crown chakra and your heart chakra and having like a kundalini awakening, right? same thing. It's like people can talk to you about it all they want. Half the time, it's probably going to sound like bullshit until it happens to you, right? And so as I'm going through that, man, the layers that were peeled away, I thought since 2012 that was like my big awakening. But this one just kind of blew the lid off of everything all at once. And it gave me a different vision in a way, a little bit deeper into the veil. Um, and it validated a lot of theories, philosophy, psychology, spirituality stuff that I'd been learning and trying to learn how to kind of work with energetically. And yeah, I would say it was the most otherworldly, proof positive that we are spiritual beings living a human experience in these meat suits, avatars, whatever you want to call it, that essentially we all experience the same things from a different perspective. That ultimately I am you from a different perspective based on basically external circumstances, but that internally, um, we all kind of go through the same hero's journey at different levels. That each dark night of the soul and each one of those heroes' journeys is kind of like removes another layer of essentially like ignorance or innocence, and it kind of starts you kind of start to see that this whole world is kind of it's inverted on us, and it's hard to see unless you've gone through it, right?
Definitely, definitely.
But that kundalini awakening thing, that took a full 30 days before I felt quote unquote normal again.
Wow.
You know,
So, so you said that your awakening kind of happened in stages. Explain, like you said, the first one happened like during the crash. It's you maybe as a youth, and then sort of explain those stages on what you came to realize and what you were learning throughout the process. And then when you had this Kundalini awakening, what changed?
well, oh wait, the crash happened. And I don't think a lot of people realize that they're unconsciously trying to like build the perfect resume within our current map of reality, kind of playing by all the rules and doing all the things and kind of following what a man does, following does what a woman does, kind of in our own creative ways. But then we get slapped in the face by this system or people that like rocks our perspective to where we start wanting to delve deeper into the truth of it all, right? So in '08, um, I just was like, man, I can't believe I never saw that coming. How did I not see that coming? How did so many other people somehow know exactly what was going on?
This the
That,
housing crash? Is that what you're
yeah,
talking
that was
about?
the housing crash, right?
Okay.
And at the time, I was a general contractor and a consultant in the wireless telecommunications industry. So I built and managed and modified cell towers up until 4G LTE for the big four major carriers. And I was also a consultant project manager where I'd manage, multiple kind of multi-million dollar site builds, mostly in the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast. But anyways, in the midst of that, I mean, overnight, man, I got laid off. We had recently moved. I had taken a job with a company straight out of Tel Aviv, Israel, a giant Israeli engineering firm that was getting into the telecom realm because it was at its peak too. And we lost all the funding to all of our projects. I was the Southwest regional manager. So I was managing like 5 different states. I'm all jacked up. I'm all excited. I'm barely getting into the job. Boom, everything goes away. My life's suddenly in total crisis mode. And so I'm just like blown away at how devastating it was to the entire economy. So what I did was is I promised myself I'll never allow this to happen to me again. I'm going to learn economics, finance, and I'm going to pay very close attention to the stock market and the combination of those things so that I can do whatever I can to prepare and hopefully have the eyes to see so this doesn't happen to me again. And within that learning, I became completely obsessed with economics. And then that led to behavioral economics, which is probably the most fascinating thing you could learn. And that's the symbiosis between psychology and economics, because economics is really ran by collective human psychology, right? So that led me deeper into psychology since I saw how collective psychology moved markets and crafted cultures. But in that process, I started diving deep with who owns who, where's the money flowing. I was connected to all the different federal and state meetings, you know, earnings calls with large Fortune 100 and 500 corporations, actually hearing, you know, what goes on in the boardrooms type thing, and just kind of slowly piecing together that puzzle. And it doesn't take long before you figure out that literally, you know, there's 5 media companies that pretty much own everything else. There's only so many food companies as parent brands that got hundreds of other brands below them. And, you know, most people just think those are all individual brands. No, they're all controlled by the same entity. And they all have centralized data. And so I transitioned from the telecommunications industry. My true passion was marketing because I love the economics and the psychology, and I've always been a bit artistic, graphic design. So I bought a couple courses and studied up and bought some frameworks and launched my digital agency in 2008. I had actually launched a company, like a credit repair company, for the run up to 2008. So that's the first way I learned to make money online. And so I kind of knew that if I did this thing right and I transitioned my business to completely online, that I could kind of craft my lifestyle. So I took it one step further, opened a digital marketing agency. It's called Musson Media Consulting. And I tried to focus on more, you know, more mid-level small businesses that were kind of visionary and wanted to work with kind of the latest and greatest tech and strategies, analytics, SEO, local SEO, stuff like that. So yeah, within 60 days, I was already making 6 figures, and I'm like, what the hell took, you know, should have done this a long time ago. And then had that for about 7 years. And during that time, I was just constantly digging deeper and deeper, especially now that I'm managing all these analytics to all these different websites and seeing how you could craft public perception through the act of authority and social proof and reviews and all these psychological concepts of or principles of persuasion, if you will. And then over time, as I'm learning it more, I'm like, man, this whole world is ran by dark psychology, bro, because dark psychology is what makes the money.
Mhm.
It's all subliminal and it's super powerful. And so then in 2012, um, I had kind of I was raised Catholic, and it was one of those deals where I was like, as soon as I'm 18 and I'm out of the house, I'm done with organized religion. Like I don't get it. Because the way I was raised, it was like, oh, you just kind of slap the brand on and kind of walk through the pearly gates. And I had always been spiritual, but I didn't really know much about what I was learning, right?
Right.
And so in 2012, I went to like just a Protestant church, more or less. It was a mega church, and there was like a rock band and an espresso stand, and I'm like, what is this, dude? I can get down with this. That's the whole point. That's why they do it. It's marketing, quite frankly. But it worked. But Protestantism got me deep into scripture and the Bible and Jesus, Yeshua. And I, everything I do, I want to just like peel back every layer and get to the most organic level of it possible that has the least amount of human manipulation, right? And so I just became obsessed with understanding the time, the culture, and everything that was going on while Christ was alive, the original languages, the translations, the Septuagint, the Torah, just as much as I could possibly learn. And that just kind of kept me diving deeper and deeper into the current reality that we live in. But I think that marketing overall and playing with everything I was learning by quote unquote deploying it into the wild and then observing the collective effects on whether it was micro markets or large markets or total industries. As my knowledge grew, the more efficient I became at essentially using the subliminal and subconscious principles to make other people a lot of money and get a chunk of it as I went. But the main obsession was that I recognized around 2013, like the dark psychology being used in marketing and the effectiveness of it and the unawareness of it. And so I got obsessed with like, how can I invert this thing to where we're not manipulating human egos, that we're awakening and at least serving people with our marketing by touching the soul through authenticity? And what if I could come up with my own theories that leverage the human soul versus the human ego? The theory was, I bet it's way more efficient and way more profitable, and everybody wins in the end. And it's not just straight consumerism, manipulation, and making money for making money's sake. So in 2014, I got an incredible opportunity to basically like build the template of kind of like what a marketing department looks like in the John Deere in the heavy equipment and farm equipment industry, and took a role as a director of marketing and got my first big budget. So I got to kind of take everything I'd always dreamed of doing in marketing and apply it with a healthy budget with the team. And that's when things really started accelerating for me as far as like the individual and the collective. But I got to back up because I skipped a major one. So in 2012, I watched the BBC docuseries called Century of the Self. And that was all about Edward Bernays. And I had already been studying Freud, Adler, and some other kind of famous psychologists. And Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew who studied all of his concepts, but also studied Jung, who was a student of Freud. And they split. You know, Freud came up with the personal conscious and the unconscious. And then Jung, through his learnings, was like, wait up, hold up, coach. There's a collective conscious and a collective unconscious too. So Bernays gets some marketing contracts to essentially manipulate markets because of his cousin who's connected with a lot of big names. And he starts playing with Freud's psychological concepts on American citizens.
Mhm.
So he started creating hypothesis. He was hired by the big tobacco brands to get women to start smoking. And since one of Freud's concepts was it the Oedipus complex?
Yeah,
Um,
I think that was his theory.
Basically about how women have a fascination with with like external that the woman would subconsciously love smoking and adopt the behavior because it was not socially acceptable, but that it was like a penis envy type thing.
Mhm.
And he seeded every major newspaper when the boys were coming home from World War II and they were coming into the seaports. He hired a ton of beautiful models. All the boys are coming off the ships and they're having the big parades. And they seated them all with cigarettes. And then they have photographers and all these beautiful women are, you know, loving and hugging on all the boys coming home in the victory parades. And they're smoking cigarettes. And he called them the mainstream media, the newspapers back then and the radio called them torches of freedom. And so it wasn't long after that until like 50% of all women were smoking cigarettes. And of course, he got a chunk of that from all the big tobacco companies for leading that. But I mean, he did psyops, he started wars, he did regime changes. He kind of did every major case study of kind of all the funny business we got going on today that a lot of people want to say is purely conspiracy. And that docu-series alone, I would recommend that. If anybody really wants to accelerate their, whatever you want to call it, your awakening or your awareness to just how controlled your reality is and just how intricate it is, and honestly, how evil genius freaking intelligently designed it is. Watch
Mhm.
BBC, The Century of the Self. Look it up on YouTube. It's probably like 6 hours. It's all documentary, but absolutely worth your time.
So it's just through this research and this knowledge and this marketing information that you were learning about the dark manipulation that was going on through the media. That's kind of what led you to your Kundalini awakening then through all this the years of basically unconscious research.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I thought that 2012 and like, well, you know, probably from about 2011 So maybe around 2013 was kind of my biggest awakening when I was
Hmm.
uncovering kind of the whole structure.
Right. But it was more
But
like you were just
the
doing
one that
research.
blew me away was mm, it would start with my divorce, which took me into um, some mental health disorders. I would call them more spiritual disorders, but certain cluster of personality disorders, which are actually everything about the behaviors are antithetical to anything that most people have been taught about what it means to be human. And so once you're touched by this, it changes your life forever. It actually, I don't know a single person that has not been affected by, cluster B personality disorders, which would just be the psychological name for it, that it doesn't become their lifelong obsession, especially if they were already curious and researching and kind of deconstructing things. Because what you find is that it's only this personality type that could get away with fooling us at such a high level day after day, man, and have no guilt. I mean, show us one thing and do something completely different, right down to the highest levels of malevolence, war for money, sacrifice of young men and women to line the pockets and power grabs. Um, and that's why I talk a lot on social media about the trickster archetype, because the trickster archetype actually everyone has it. It's just whether they are aware of the unconscious behaviors of trickster that they have in them that they need to become aware of and integrate, and then confidently show that you have that, but you use it responsibly. Trickster is essentially the evil genius. You know what I mean? He's and in America, in Western culture, I mean, a lot of what we're taught is kind of like who can be the most evil genius but appear good.
Mm.
That's a trickster.
Right, right, right.
And so when you heal the wounds and the self-deception that comes along with that, the opposite of trickster is the healer. It's a beautiful thing
And do you
because
feel like you're a healer now, or how do you feel that?
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah, we can heal purely through energy and conversation. That's kind of like my side quest, my side passion is basically, especially with younger, say 35 under, as far as I go, I'm 48. But especially like 30 and under right now in our culture, man, is so deceived. They're so, you got to figure that they're the only generation that has grown up completely online.
Hmm.
And they don't understand. They're learning as we go. A 30-year-old today probably knows as much about digital marketing as a digital marketing professional back in 2008,
Right.
just through toying around and being on all these platforms for this long and seeing how, niches of people who are only interested in certain subjects end up down those timelines through algorithms and cognitive bias and everything that goes into that. But um, yeah, my personal passion is my ability through everything I've learned through this journey to be able to kind of like help people see the truth through energy. And people need to understand that we're transitioning from an emotionally based world to an energetic world. And we're kind of still little children as far as like spiritual maturity, emotional maturity. You know, everything's about trigger words and you can say this and you can't say that. No, that'll cancel you and that won't and blah blah blah. And it's like, no, no, that's all lies, man. Like we need to become triggerless because if it gets to the point where we learn, we're awakening at a very fast pace right now, whether people want to admit it or not. The whole goal is to keep us from understanding what's going on as far as the depth of how much it controls our lives.
Let me ask you this, Tyler, before we move on. You're now very active on Facebook sharing spiritual messages. What are you hoping to reach or teach the masses through your posts and through your information that you've learned?
Mm, you know, Steve Jobs said something in like a commencement speech at like UC Berkeley or something years ago. He said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. I'm well aware that most of what I share might not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but I'm so confident in what I've learned and what I know and who I am through it all that as people awaken and go through the similar steps that everybody does, that that's all going to make sense later on. But the main thing is teaching what it means to blindly trust and have your consciousness manipulated by people who are, quite frankly, masters at manipulating human consciousness against us.
Are you talking about the dark entities or I guess the cabal? What are you referring to specifically?
I think we're way too that's my other part of my message is this goes all the way down to the bottom level. We are way too focused on, you know, the 12 or 13 families, you know, the WEF, the Bilderberg, and yes, all that is important. But it's just another projection to keep us from going internal. We're constantly looking out, and that's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want us to understand that that is that is within is in without. Like we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. And until people go deep within and heal themselves from all the shame that essentially this system creates and see it clearly and stop being triggered by immature shit. Um, I lost my train of thought, but that basically um, we're suffering from something that is probably much more widespread than people think. About 20% of the population. And so Pareto's law is in full effect. I believe that the 20% of this population is responsible for 80 to 90% of the fraud, waste, abuse, corruption, everything bad in this world,
Mm.
because I've experienced it firsthand way too many times. And I'm
Wow.
tired of watching other people get fooled. And right now, I believe we are in a mass humiliation ritual by sociopaths, quite frankly. And my warning is this: you don't want to know what that mask looks like when it comes off. It is scary enough as an individual human to think that you can trust something or love a person to that level, but then a specific thing happen and they show their true colors. And then you're like, I mean, just rocked because you just can't even believe it until it's happened to you. And how far a person like this will go to ensure that no one hears your side of the story. So no one can put two and two together and see how, that this is a massive problem. I've lost my whole support system, my whole family, because what I found doing all this studying from the elites down was that holy shit, I was raised in this framework. And
I think we all were at some point, like we all were raised in this framework. I mean, that's why people are kind of conditioned to go to school, get good grades, go get in the matrix, work 50, 60 years until you die, basically pay taxes. And that's sort of the framework that we're moving out of, but that's kind of how we've been conditioned.
totally agree. I just mean like the on the cluster B spectrum of personality traits.
Mm.
So it kind of gave me a little bit more x-ray vision from a younger age, having a experience in like a Donald Trump type archetype or a Kamala Harris type archetype. She's a covert, Trump's overt. He's out there with it, man. Right?
Hmm.
And the left has become much more covert and sneaky, and that's even more dangerous. At least Trump's out there. You know what I mean? Um, quite frankly, I think his greatest strategy ever would be to become a self-aware narcissistic psychopath
He might already
who,
be that, and he just hasn't revealed it. He might already be there.
well, quite frankly, man, the awakening is the awakening to this,
Hmm.
but we're not getting it. And the getting it the hard way on an individual level can absolutely obliterate your entire life.
Right.
Personal apocalypse, baby. Trust me, I've been through it. I've been fighting it for over 5 years now. And so if it can be this destructive on an individual level, I cannot imagine, on a country level. You know what I mean? So the whole message is grow up, guys. We got to grow up. We're not children. This ain't mommy and daddy. These are not our spiritual parents. They're humans just like us, but there's not a psychologist out there that won't tell you to get to that level of politics. You you have to screw so many people over and lie so much that it would be impossible for a healthy, functioning, empathetic person to even get close to that level.
I suppose.
So tell me about you, brother. Tell
Yeah.
me
So,
about you, man.
yeah. So, I'm originally from California, from East Palo Alto, California, which is in the Bay Area, and I was actually I
Yo,
was raised in a very urban setting, but my parents were Jehovah's Witnesses growing up, so I was raised Jehovah's Witness.
murder capital of the United States in the 90s, dude.
You know about East Palo Alto?
Bro, that's why I'm like, no way. This is a total synchronicity. One of my best friends in the Marine Corps, Mahafatao Sanalio, ooh, he was a man among men, Tongan. And he used to take me back home to East Palo Alto into the ghetto, bro. White boy in the ghetto in the late 90s. And I'm not saying it all is. I'm just saying where he was, and the experience of that was actually an awakening for me.
Hmm.
It really was. I'm just some white kid that grew up on a farm. Compared to what I experienced, privileged as hell, man. And not even knowing how to be grateful at that level. But
Mhm.
at the same time, it was the funnest time I ever had. It was amazing.
Hmm.
So, anyways, yeah, man, that's so crazy. I tell this story all the time, and I talk about East Palo Alto, and I've never had a single person know
Where it
East
is.
Palo Alto. And
Yeah,
here
man.
I am with you. Wow, man. So
Small
sorry,
world.
but huge synchronicity.
Yep. So yeah, so we were raised, Joe's Witness. So even though we were in the hood, like my mother and father, they were pretty, I don't know when I say they were protective, but within the house unit, we weren't really exposed to a lot of the street stuff that was going on. I would say we were sheltered to some degree. Um,
Yeah.
and it's a very much a cult where Jehovah's Witnesses don't really associate outside of their religion, that sort of thing. So that's what I did up until high school, and even graduated in let's see, in 1991. I took a year off, and then I went to community college and I started studying broadcast journalism. And I transferred to University of Florida after I graduated from the College of San Mateo, and just continued to study broadcasting because that's kind of the direction that I went in. And kind of, I was still fairly active even when I went to Florida. My father was kind of like, he was Jehovah's Witness, but he was kind of like, look, these kids, they have to live in a society, they have to have jobs, so they have to educate themselves. So he wasn't like anti-college. So that wasn't really at the time. I don't know if they really believe that now, but at the time they were kind of anti-college. But I ended up going to University of Florida. And then when I graduated, I got my first job in Washington, D.C. And my roommates, they were
Ooh.
not Jehovah's Witnesses, obviously. And that's when I sort of started wondering, well, they're not Jehovah's Witnesses. Are they not going to get everlasting life because they don't believe the same thing I believe in? So I started having questions. And then I went to Florida for my first reporter job. I got a job in Tampa, and I got exposed to, like, went to a story, went to Islamic mosque for a story, went to Catholic mass on a Sunday, went to Jewish synagogue, went to a Indian temple. So I kind of got exposed to all these different schools of thought, and
Yeah.
kind of like you, kind of like, it wasn't like I wasn't realizing at the time. But then I got married in 2001, and then 2003 I got interested in the auras for some reason. And I got a book by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and the book was channeled by Kathumi and Joel Cull, I believe. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. They were ascended masters. And in the book, it had some familiar terms like their white brotherhood. They were kind of biblical terms. The I am presence. It was like a lot of talk about the I am
Okay.
presence,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
the order Melchizedek. So there was just some similar phrases that I recognized from my biblical, background.
Yeah. Right.
And so then I started meditating, and I started getting really interested in ascended masters and started researching that online, and started, there's a website called Merkaba.org. And I started like learning about the Merkaba and like Egyptology and all this. And there was a meditation that I found. It was called the Christ-like meditation. And I did it one day, and like my hands, like the energy through my hands, like cramped my hands up like this. And it took like 10 minutes for me to regain use of my hands. So that's when I was like, there's something going on with like this meditation, with the energy. And that's sort of what got me on this path. And there was some talk about the ascension back then, but I really didn't know what it all meant. But then as I've just continued to learn and educate myself, I've just realized that we're living in really special times right now. And I've just continued to educate myself. I'm definitely out of the whole Jehovah's Witness framework now. My mind is like, phew. I still have a lot of colleagues and friends and family members and folks I grew up with who are still affiliated, but I've kind of moved on from that. And that's kind of where I am now. So now I'm just looking to get stories from other folks who are on the same kind of similar path and find out what their sort of stories were. And yeah, I'm married with a kid. I live in Georgia now. And that's pretty much my story in a nutshell. I worked in broadcasting for about 35 years. I worked for mainstream media. I worked for the a Fox station in Tampa for about 8 years. Moved to Atlanta. I did some freelance work, worked for a couple networks, and I ended up working at Fox 5 here in Atlanta from 2013 to about a year ago. And then I went on disability about a year ago. So now that's what I do, man. This is what I do now. So that's my story.
Super
That's kind of the
excited.
summary of my story. Yeah.
So love your hero's journey to truth. And you reminded me of multiple, I would call maybe sub awakenings throughout the journey. Another huge one for me, man, that I forgot was transcendental meditation
Mm-hmm.
specifically. I had done meditations, guided meditations, stuff like that, but I got certified in TM, and that just is just crazy to experience consistent raw flow and presence, and just how much that accelerates your manifestations and synchronicities, um, removes any fear blocks. You're just in flow.
Mm.
But and then learning about the Maharishi, who essentially, I don't know if he didn't invent it, but he was like the spiritual guru to like the Beatles.
Okay.
And that's when the Beatles
When they
just
went to India.
went off the chain. When they went to India, met Maharishi, couldn't get enough, were staying there. And that's when their music and their albums just started going nuts. And then they brought Maharishi to America. He got on a bunch of talk shows. And then David Geffen, I think, learned transcendental meditation, and it just took off from there. But yeah, big one for me as far as being able to see past the layers more clearly was TM.
Yeah, I've never done TM, but I have a friend up in DC who has done TM. She does TM, and she made me aware of it a few years back, but I've never tried it. But it sounds like it can be a very valuable form of meditation.
It's super simple, man. It's one of those things you're like, what? It's essentially just you got each person gets assigned their own individual mantra, and then you don't speak it out loud, you just speak it in your head.
Hmm.
And it's 23 minutes. And all it is just a practice. I call it clearing the cache and the cookies.
Hmm.
Um, and as thoughts come in, you don't judge them.
Just observe them.
You observe, push away, go back to the mantra. You might be good for 30 seconds, a minute, another thought comes in. And usually what it teaches you is that to pay attention to your thoughts.
Right.
Look at how many, even when you're trying not to think, they come in, you attach to them, and then 5 minutes goes by before you're like, oh, whoa, 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 I'm supposed to be meditating.
Yep. Yep.
Push it away. But you don't judge yourself for it. You keep going. So it's like slowly clearing and almost capturing, I think, some of our pervasive thoughts that have a lot more control in our lives than we would ever imagine unless we focus for that long. And you're supposed to do it 2 times a day for 23 minutes, which
Mm.
I did religiously for a while and had a total quantum leap. But the Christianity walk, and really, to me, I translate Christ to be like, yo, if a bunch of y'all went out and actually acted like me, imagine what that would do to the world.
It would change the world.
It would absolutely change the world, 100 of them, much less
Hmm.
1,000. And so today I would kind of call myself Gnostic, Christian, quantum, making it almost as science based as possible. But to me, it's like, I don't want to trust anything man made
Hmm.
more. So I'm going to live my life to the best of my ability, like the Christ. And what you find is the world will persecute you and hate you just like they hated him for telling the truth,
For telling the truth, for being himself. Yep.
for being the highest version of yourself as you can be right now.
Hmm.
That authenticity and expressing the human soul is like the rarest thing on this earth.
And they'll call you crazy for it too, like for being yourself. They'll be like, "You're crazy." It's kind of interesting how if you're not in the mainstream or you're not thinking like everyone else, like a clone or like a bot, that you're
Yeah,
actually the odd man out.
yeah. And to go into like the entities and the energy, we get caught up on labels and names
Hmm.
and what they mean to us personally. So, like for me, honestly, whether God is a spiritual creator of all things, or it's some alien race that's far smarter than us, the bottom line is we know there's something intelligent that has more control over our reality than a lot of us want to admit.
And the
And
question is, what is reality? Because I mean, it's all an illusion. So what are we creating? What kind of world have we created, and what's our future going to be like if we don't change our paths, right? If the masses don't sort of wake up to the, I guess, the dark entities or to the manipulation that's been going on, or whatever it may be, to whatever folks don't like, basically, how are we going to create the world that we want to live in? That's kind of our mission here.
by living our lives from the inside out, we're transitioning from an objective world to a subjective world. We're transitioning from the fulcrum of control in the matrix is judgment and the belief in things you haven't even verified.
Mhm.
And to know that to manipulate human consciousness would be to say, I'm a higher authority than you, and therefore you must believe me purely because I say so. And I looked the part and I got the dimes and I got the house and I got the cars rather than, you know, being able to discern, is this person who he or she says they are? Or am I just commanded to believe? And then because I treat them like spiritual parents, I start following their same lead. And
Mhm.
before you know it, I'm gaining power, I'm gaining wealth, I'm gaining influence, I'm gaining status. And the more you get of that without knowing how trickster is activated, which is through grandiosity and a sense of superiority. You see, the black man has soul because he was awakened to this a long time ago. The Native American was awakened to this. The Jews were awakened to this because it does come from superiority, unconscious or conscious. And judgment comes from a sense of separation and superiority.
Judgment
right?
and fear, right? I mean, fear plays a big part in the lower
Yep.
vibrations as well.
Judgment, judgment creates shame, which makes us feel not human, not worthy. So
Lower
we,
than.
yeah, lower than so, it's like every child knew exactly what he wanted to be, but not one thing you wanted to be as a child probably fit into the education system and the in industry to essentially be a wage slave, to be an investor in the largest, most powerful organization in the world through your taxes and your energy.
Mhm.
Our energy and our money and our attention and our beliefs have been hijacked by a bunch of people who believe there are gods. And they ain't our gods. Last thing they want to figure out is there is a God. And we are connected. I believe we're like little gods connected to a big God.
Mhm.
And we're all here for a purpose.
Mhm.
We're all here on contract on a very special, specific mission that we chose. And it's up to us to remember what it is.
So that kind of leads us into my final three questions, Tyler. What does awakening mean to you?
Exercising whole human dynamics and knowing exactly who you are, what your true powers are, so that you can exercise that as an example in the world so that others may have an inspiration and a template to follow when that, you know, belief structure gets shattered and they feel like an alien. And they don't know where to turn, and people are calling them crazy, and da da da. The awakening is the hardest and the most incredible thing you could ever go through in this lifetime. And we do. We live in the greatest timeline of all of human history, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And it's exciting. And they're going to try to ramp up the fear to level 20
Oh yeah, to 100. They're gonna
or
turn it way up.
100. And that's what they do. They siphon that fear to manufacture our consent for them to remain in control of how this world operates.
But I think that time is short for those bad actors. That's why I really believe that time is really short for them.
It
So,
is. And I don't believe anybody's left behind.
mhm.
I
Yep.
think that we live in hell right now, brother.
Oh, amen to that.
Right?
Yep.
And so, in my opinion, we're in the great transition of the great split, which will also be the great awakening. And it will be a choice as to what part of the split you want to be a part of.
Hmm.
Awakening means human sovereignty and the power of our divinity and the power of God and the truth that sets us all free to be exactly what we were made to be, man.
Wow, that's well said, man. You can't say anything more perfect than that. All right, next question is what's the most valuable lesson you've learned in life so far?
Man.
I guess there's just one.
Right? Um, I would say that if you challenge yourself to speak the truth no matter what, I mean, say it in love as much as you can, but from the inside out, Nothing will awaken you faster than that,
Mm.
because it'll inform you of all the different ways where you hold back, or you wear a little mask, or you do what you got to do to fit in. And the moment you start consistently expressing your true self is the moment you're going to start seeing that this reality ain't what I thought it was. This person was not who I thought they were. And what I thought was love was not love. Like
Right.
everything gets flipped around.
Yep. Yep.
And so
Because
telling the truth to the best of your ability will be the greatest personal development in your life. And number two would be that betrayal trauma is the highest form of personal development.
mm,
And so when you are betrayed by people, places, and things, step into that. You can only be victimized once. Too many people out there are doing it's called repetition compulsion. And they're not healing the wounds that got them in a situation with the wolves in sheep's clothing who betrayed them and took advantage of them. And instead of looking at the childhood wounds, most likely, that made you blind to that, they walk right back into the trap again. But every time you're betrayed is one of the greatest opportunities to become conscious and operating on a fuller spectrum of the human, and not, kind of not being so innocent and naive,
mm,
because what we're unconscious of is able to take advantage of us. And
mm.
I believe all the gifts of the human are going to be exposed soon.
Oh yeah, mutants. The mutants are gonna reawaken.
And our ability to manipulate will be greatly diminished, if not completely eradicated.
Yep. Amen to that. All right, last question for you. What advice would you give to someone who's going through an awakening experience?
I'm still off and on fighting it, and that is trying to awaken others. I would say in the beginning, just keep it personal as much as possible.
Mhm.
Step into it. Don't freak out. You're not going crazy. Um, that if they ever want to reach out to me, me and some very close friends, I've kind of built a whole new map of reality. And we're going to be kind of teaching frameworks of like advanced, you know, for once someone has awakened, to kind of fast track them through kind of a framework of learning and experiencing. But main thing, like, you're going to feel alone. You're going to feel completely isolated. You're going to feel like nobody understands. And so I'm here. I'm here, brothers and sisters. And I love everybody. Um, so yeah, I would say that don't be scared to reach out to anyone, no matter where they are in the world, who claims to have, you know, been going through this. There's nothing better than having a friend that understands.
How can folks connect with you, Tyler?
What's that?
How can folks connect with you? Like if they want to reach out.
Yeah, you can just reach out through Messenger or Facebook, Instagram.
Is Tyler
Um,
Musson just your first last name?
yeah, Tyler Musson.
Cool.
We're about to launch a full blown something I've been working on since 2012. It's essentially a battle plan to invert the phantom matrix upon itself. Become sovereign, still play by all the rules of society while also building and living the life of your dreams. People that have been brought low and mocked and been called crazy for all this stuff. You know, just like Jesus said, the high will be brought low and the low will be brought high. That's going to happen. So, yeah, just basically social media. And I'm really good with shadow work. You know, everybody uses it kind of as a buzzword, but I'm like full blown into the Jungian side of it, which is he's the OG of shadow work. He invented it. And so shadow work is your ability to become triggerless and to become fully authentic.
Become the observer.
You become the observer. And now we're getting to the point where it's like the observer of the observer of the observer. And a lot of people aren't even at the observer level yet. And then we got the metaverse.
I'm still working on it. Still work in progress.
Yeah, man, we all are, right?
Yes, sir.
But hey, so tell me, what's your number one piece of advice for someone awakening? Or
my advice would just be not to let the information drive you crazy. Like, just take it one bite at a time. Just realize that things are not as what they seem, and to find a tribe. You know, find folks like yourself, like myself. Like find your tribe that you can relate to, because a lot of folks your family might not understand. They probably won't understand. So watch who, like you said, watch who you talk to. You know, you kind of have to just learn as much as you can, but don't let it drive you crazy.
Yeah, don't let it consume you.
Because it can. Because the rabbit hole is deep, definitely.
Yeah. Yes, it is interesting too how things that I thought were totally off the wall years ago,
yeah,
make total sense to me now. Definitely. And I was the guy going, that dude's
crazy.
Exactly. Which is where the judgment comes in, right?
Yep, definitely.
And that's the other thing. I think awakening is so hard because it's the first time you recognize karma and eventually recognize that judgment has been programmed into us to control us. And so throughout your awakening, your dark night of the soul, more or less, you're kind of going to be experiencing all the conscious and unconscious judgment that you had against others.
Brother Tyler, we're just about out of time, man. I want to thank you so much for taking some few minutes with me to share your insights, man. We'll have to do it again.
Absolutely.